Hello everybody, welcome back to Invisible UX. Today we'll continue our series on Figma tutorials with part 1 of a session on stroke. Enjoy. Now, fixed position when scrolling applies a stickiness to an object or a component. So we're going to keep those constraints. We're going to move on to layer. So very high level, if you're familiar with the Adobe Creative Suite, Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, any sort of photo editing software, Figma uses the same layers as these other pieces of software. So you have normal, darken, multiply, color burn, lighten, screen, color dodge, all of the typical stuff. So I'm not going to go into detail with each one, but just know that it's very similar to the other layers or effects in other design software. Now each option here, we'll treat that overlap a little bit differently. So we'll go back to our sort of standard pass-through, go back to 100% opacity. And the eyeball, similar to many other pieces of software, just dictates the visibilities. If you see the eyeball, the layer is visible. If you turn it off, the layer is not visible. Okay, so moving on to fill. This is very similar to what we looked at in our frames session. So we can select the fill by objects. We can select both objects, and I'll hold down Shift while selecting each. And since both were selected, we added a fill which has been applied to both objects. Now we can apply different colors to both objects, again, since they're both selected. Let's go light green. Similar to what we did before, we can take that fill down to 50%, all the way down to 0. So 0% opacity on the fill is almost like having no fill. So you could either have 0% fill or delete the fill altogether. When you delete the fill, you're left with a stroke. So moving on to the stroke. The stroke is an outline of the object that's being selected. Okay, now you may notice these little blue dotted lines. That refers to the constraints that are on that particular object. Okay, so with stroke, you can select any color you want. You can adjust the opacity of that stroke. So with no fill and a 0% opacity, we don't see anything related to the object. The selection lines will still show, but once it's not selected, you don't see anything. So I'll make that visible. You can easily select any of the document colors. You can dictate whether you're entering a hex, RGB, CSS, etc. code. So if we go 0000000, we get black. If we get six Fs, we get whites. So let's just select red there. And then just another way to adjust the opacity of that stroke here within the menu. Okay, so you can adjust that opacity within the design properties menu, or if you have the color dialog open, you can adjust it there. Okay. So again, you can add a stroke. So we can select green, 100% opacity. And if you give each of those 50% opacities, and you can adjust the visibility of each stroke.